Hey, I'm walking here with my kids in Nova Scotia, in the forest, looking at a $125,000 fine for walking on this beautiful trail. We don't smoke. We're not going to light a fire. I don't think really anybody else is going to do that either who is a decent citizen. So I think it's bullshit that the government is trying to stop people from walking in the forest. Hey kids, what are we? Free! That's right, we're free.
Hey now.
Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road. Hey now.
Hey now.
Feels good to say that. It's been a week. How you doing, everybody? Thanks for checking into a new episode of Scott Fox After 9. I was off last week, and that means today we've got to spend a little bit of time catching up on some of the things that have happened, because I have certainly seen your DMs. A lot of people reached out to me last week. Most of you, I think I'm caught up on replies, but if I owe you one, I will get to it. I've just got so many in my inbox. It's getting harder and harder to keep up. But I heard from a lot of people about a lot of different issues last week, and I feel like there's some things that even though I was off, even though they're kind of old news, quote unquote, they still deserve a discussion. You just heard me open the pod with a clip from a Nova Scotia man who took his kids out for a walk in the forest. He was facing a $125,000 fine for doing that, for going for a walk in the forest with his kids in the summertime. And there's a lot of people who feel this is the epitome of government overreach. There's a lot of other people that feel, though, that this is just a good, common sense, practical thing. We've got a forest fire problem. Let's keep people out of the forests. I'm going to weigh in on that topic, and I'm also going to talk about Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who made headlines several times when I was away last week, namely because of something I've been trying to flag for people for a long time. He's not a rational man when it comes to Donald Trump, and it's not just him. What have I been saying for months now? Old white men cannot handle Donald Trump. Whenever Trump's name comes up, they come completely unglued. And while that's totally fine for the vast majority of us, I feel like when you are leading one of the biggest province in Canada, and you are the guy that many people are looking to do what you said you would do and protect us from Donald Trump, I feel like it's very unbecoming of Doug Ford to continuously have a meltdown every time the thought of Donald Trump comes up. So I'm going to talk about Premier Ford in this episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about Donald Trump in this one. Mark Carney is going to be on my radar while he's vacationing this week. That's right. Can you believe it? That guy's on vacation this week. Now, it's a staycation. He's going to be staying in the Ottawa area, and his staff is going to keep him up to date if there's something he needs to know. But otherwise, this is basically a vacation week for the Prime Minister. I'm going to say it. That's not appropriate given what's going on right now. I feel that everybody's entitled to vacation, but when you're the Prime Minister and you set the bar as high as you did, and so far haven't met any of those things, this probably isn't the right time for Mark Carney to be on vacation. So we'll talk about that as well. We got jobs numbers in last week that underscore something that I've been forecasting for a very long time. We've got a Jewish man brutally beaten and attacked in Montreal in front of his kid. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. And if there's time in this episode, I'm also going to circle back on Russiagate, the Epstein files, and why tourism in Las Vegas is way, way, way down. Las Vegas, they say, is a ghost town right now, and that's mainly because there's a lot less people going to it. Now, what could have caused that? I'm going to circle back on that as well. Let's get into the episode, everybody. This one is going to be an interesting one. I think I'm going to try and present you with many different angles, maybe some that you haven't seen yet. And I'm going to try and give you a little context and clarity into some of the big stories that are being discussed today. I feel like the topic that's going to come up for a lot of people is what's happening on Canada's East Coast. The province of Nova Scotia was first to go, and then the province of New Brunswick followed up very quickly, banning people from walking in the woods. They want you to stay out of the forest. And if you don't, you're going to get a fine that is far, far, far more punitive than some of the corrective measures that we issue to other people for serious crimes. $25,000 if you are caught in the forest in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. Let's hear a little bit from Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston.
We're here today because the experts have advised, and we agree, that more precautionary steps are required. We have to stay in front of this. We can take steps while we are in the middle of trying to fight fires, or we can be proactive and try to prevent them. And we have chosen to be proactive and try to prevent fires. So based on the recommendations of Scott Tingley and his team, they recommended, and we agree with the following. Effective 4 p.m. today, we're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods. We are restricting travel and activities that really aren't necessary for most of us. Hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits. Camping is allowed, but only in official campgrounds. The fine for violating any of these bans is the same as the fine for the ban on burning, $25,000.
Well, there it is. There's the announcement that has created another fight on social media, another division in the people. Nova Scotia, and now New Brunswick has followed, have banned people from going into the forest. Let's talk a little bit about that because it is a controversial topic, and there's some people who feel very strongly one way or the other. Now, some would argue, very similar to what Premier Houston there is arguing, that if we keep people out of the forest, the chances of people starting a forest fire are far, far, far less. There's an argument here that 90% of the wildfires that are burning were actually caused by humans. Now, that's a bit of an about face because for several years now, we have been lectured ad nauseum by our elected officials that climate change is what's causing these fires and we have to do something to stop it. And if we don't stop climate change, the whole country will be devoured of trees. They really wanted us to think that it was climate change causing those forest fires. And for all I know, maybe it was. I'm not an expert on these things, but I think everybody has some common sense there and they can think this through. Let me give you a quick example. For anyone who has ever started a backyard campfire, maybe you've been camping and tried to start a campfire. Maybe you have a fireplace that burns wood at home. I find it incredibly difficult to start a fire. To me, it is amazing how hard it is to make a log burn, even if it's split and dry. Sometimes it takes a lot of kindling to get that fire going. That's why I don't truly understand how these fires happen and spread as quickly and rapidly as they do. I've never seen a good explanation for how that happens. I've heard things like a lightning strike will light up a tree. Okay, but how does that tree catch another tree that's 15 feet away on fire? I don't understand the inner dynamics of a forest fire. So maybe I'm not the best expert to be talking to you about forest fire prevention. But one thing I do know is a lot of the things at the base of the trees, those sticks that are dried out and that have fallen down, the leaves and the litter and things like that, all of those things could possibly be a contributing factor to these forest fires burning the way they do. Some of these forest fires are in very remote areas where there's no people that we know of. Is it possible somebody just drove to northern Saskatchewan and started a fire? I guess it's possible. I can't quite figure out why they would do that. There's certainly some anecdotal evidence to suggest there are those who don't like the current regulations when it comes to clearing areas so that they can build a manufacturing facility or a new home, for example. A lot of rules about cutting down trees, as you likely know if you've ever gone to the city and said, I'd like to cut down a tree on my property. It's quite the process to cut down a tree and very expensive. So some would say if you just light it on fire, nobody can say anything. The tree has to come down after it's burned. Okay, all right, sure. Maybe there's some people who are intentionally burning down forests. Maybe it is just lightning. Maybe it is litter and poorly managed forests. If that's what it is, and I have a strong suspicion that poorly managed forests are part of the problem here. That's something that falls on the federal government. And we know from the Jasper fire and several others that the government hasn't exactly been all that proactive in clearing these forests of all the things that could possibly start a forest fire. So is it people that are doing this inadvertently? Is it people that are going for a walk and starting fires? I mean, I personally don't like the woods. I'll be honest, I'll say it. Maybe it's anti-Canadian, but I see no benefit to me for going for a walk in the woods. Maybe the trails and the conservation areas and places like that, but even those are supposed to be managed by the government. They make sure that there's no excess things lying around that could contribute to a forest fire if a spark breaks out. Will we have less forest fires or any forest fires if we keep people out of the forests? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know. But I suspect that the average run-of-the-mill Canadian who just wants to go for a walk on a trail is a very low risk to start a fire as long as they aren't doing things that could cause a fire. Smoking is an obvious one to me. Smokers, I know, I'm right there with you. I do it too from time to time. You take a couple puffs of your cigarette and then you chuck the butt. Well, we all know there's a correct way to dispose of a cigarette, especially one that's still lit, still got the heater on it. You're supposed to put it out properly. Not everybody does. And if you just throw a cigarette, a lit one, into a wooded area, yeah, I suppose there's a real risk of a forest fire starting, potentially. But then why would we ban people altogether rather than just banning smoking? Some people will say, well, Scott, you just can't trust people anymore. You tell them not to smoke and they're going to smoke anyway. Maybe there should be meaningful punishments then when somebody does start a forest fire, even if it's accidental. Maybe we should actually punish people who do this because the end result is the same and it affects all of us. When a forest burns down, we have less trees. Our insurance rates are going to go up. Some people may be displaced. Wildlife and animals are going to get hurt. We don't want forest fires, obviously. But we need to find a balance where Canadians can do exactly what we have been doing since we settled this country. Walking through the forest. For some people, it's a great way to stay grounded and connected to nature, going for a walk in the forest. For other people, it's a matter of comfort. It's a lot cooler in the forest. When you get that tree canopy, it provides that shade. It's a little cooler in certain forests, and a lot of people appreciate that and could use a break from the heat. So what do we do now? You've got the government in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick saying, nope, everybody's got to stay out of the forest because we got to prevent forest fires. And then you've got regular people who walk through the forest all the time and up until now have never once caused a forest fire. Why should they be banned from that activity? And then the argument gets personal, because that in itself is an argument we could have. If we ban people from the forests, is that a smart, common sense, proactive way of trying to mitigate forest fire damage? That's a conversation we can have. But now it is getting personal. There's some who see this as pure government overreach. And after we just came out of a wild time of government overreach during COVID, there's a lot of people who don't want to be told anymore by the government where they can and can't go and what they can and can't do. A lot of people who feel this is just a first step. It starts with stay out of the forests. And by the time they've convinced everybody that forest fires are only caused by people walking through the forest, the new messaging will be, you know what, just stay home. Stay home. Flatten the curve. 2 weeks and we'll have these forest fires under control. Sounds a little familiar. Some people, though, are drawing that comparison and thinking this is just the beginning. If you give the government permission to govern you harder, they'll continuously govern you harder. There's a lot of people who feel it's unreasonable to ban people from walking in the forest when the more practical, common sense solution might be just ban people from doing the things that could cause a fire. People in forests is not necessarily the problem. People littering, people smoking, people having campfires, people cooking, people doing things like that. That could cause a forest fire. Wouldn't it make more sense to just ban the activities that could lead to a fire rather than ban people from the forest? Is that a happy medium here? Or is there any pleasing some of these people? People who truly feel they have a right to walk in the forest, whether you tell them to smoke or not to smoke or not, they're probably going to have a smoke if they're a smoker. If you tell them no campfires, some of them are going to light a campfire anyway. I feel like there was a compromise here, and I feel like we missed out on the compromise, and the discourse now is getting real ugly on social media. People saying that you're not a patriot, that you're stupid, if you want to go for a walk in the forest. I mean, that's completely preposterous. Like I said, we've been doing this since we settled this country. That's part of our heritage. We go out into the wilderness. We've got some of the best wilderness and backcountry in the world here in Canada. To tell Canadians, number one, stay home, staycation, don't go to the States, stay home, enjoy our backyard, but don't you go into the forest. It seems a little counterintuitive and contrary to the messaging we've been given for the last number of months. But if we have a forest fire problem, maybe keeping people out of the forest is a practical idea. I think that there was a happy medium. I feel like the government could have looked for a compromise, but they didn't take it. Not in Nova Scotia, not in New Brunswick, and I'm curious to see which provinces ban going into the woods next. This should not be a left and right issue. It really shouldn't be. But there's a lot of people that are stretching to make this one a left versus right. Well, here's me sitting here slightly right of center. I think the compromise was ban the things that could lead to a fire. Don't ban people from going into the forest. $25,000 fine. That's ridiculous. It's crazy that someone might actually have to pay a $25,000 fine for violating something that's arguably not going to be particularly effective anyway. The government can't look at us now and say, with no people in the forests, we shouldn't have a problem with forest fires. Because forest fires do start in many different ways. The fine is excessive, and when we look around at all the violent crime that's happening and the punishments that those people get, and then you compare it to a regular tax-paying, law-abiding citizen who thought, this is just ridiculous. Nobody is going to tell me I can't go for a walk in the bush behind my house. And it's Crown land. So you could get a $25,000 fine. I understand it. I really do understand the argument. I don't see the need to be fighting over this, and I'm not going to spend much more time on it, but I am going to suggest that before anybody in Ontario, BC, what other provinces might do this? Quebec might do it, Newfoundland and Labrador. Before you get any bad ideas, before you do something extreme like ban people from forests, ask yourself if there is a compromise. We should always look for the compromise. If there's a way that we can still let people enjoy the forests, but ban the activities which might actually lead to a fire, I would think that that should be satisfactory for most people. I get it. It's dry out. There's burn bans all over the place right now. That seems very common sense to me because we all know how quickly even a campfire can get out of control. How one flaming ember that floats away in the air could, in theory, start an entire forest fire. We understand that. So yeah, I get it. Why there's burn bans. That's a compromise, though. They're not saying you can't have a fire. They're just saying your fire has to be in a safe place and managed responsibly. I feel like we need a happy medium here. And I'm going to move on without giving you my exact opinion on this because I don't have one. I don't. I understand the argument both ways. What I hate is the belittling of each other for how people feel. Hey, if you really like the fact that the government banned people from going into the forest, you're allowed to like that, but you don't need to take a victory lap on it because some people take this deeply personal. For some people, that's a way of life. For some people, that's their entertainment. That's how they stay cool. That's their vacation. We don't have to take a victory lap on stupid stuff here, guys. We got way, way, way bigger things to think about. Banning people from the forest was probably overreach. Is it necessary? I guess time will tell. If there's any more forest fires that break out in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick, I guess we can assume it wasn't people that were the problem. Then we have to look into what did cause it. And we have to look into a whole bunch of things. I don't ever remember wildfires like we've got right now. Some people suggest it's climate change. Some people suggest it's arson. Some people suggest it's carelessness. It's a lack of rain. It is whatever. Either way, we've got it, and we've got to get the problem under control. I'd like to know why we haven't doubled down on water bombers. These water bomber planes seem very, very effective at putting out large areas of fire. Why don't we have tons more of them? Mark Carney has committed to 5% of our GDP for military spending. I don't think it would be that outrageous or controversial to suggest that forest fire mitigation is a responsibility that the armed forces can take part in and slide the water bomber purchases in under the defense budget. To me, that's an easy one. It checks a couple of different boxes. We get more water bombers that are available to other countries in the world. Canada's always there to help out when other countries need our help, and they can use our water bombers when we don't need them here. I think that this is a very smart thing to do, and I can't figure out why the government hasn't done it yet. Case in point, we have wildfires burning in southern Ontario now. That shouldn't be that surprising. It doesn't happen very often, but just north of Bobcaygeon, Kawartha Lakes area, there's a couple wildfires burning out of control. We've got water bombers bombing the hell out of that fire. They're going to get that under control pretty quick, I think. But that means 2 less water bombers that Ontario could have sent to Newfoundland to help them battle their forest fires. See what I mean? We could be a forest fighting nation. We really could be. There's a lot of calls right now to create a fire management office of some sort. I really don't know what that office is going to do, but I'm going to suggest to you that we have a force ready to go. We do have the resources to deal with this. Every single municipality in the country has got a small army of trained firefighters. Maybe we should just reimagine how Canada works and how our firefighting system works. Maybe firefighters shouldn't have to spend so much time doing some of the mundane stuff they do, and maybe within each municipality, it happens to fall under the fire department to make sure that the forests are adequately managed. We've seen that the federal government either can't manage this or they're not interested in managing this. I think on some level, the federal government kind of likes this forest fire thing because it helps them drive home their message that climate change is causing forest fires. Again, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not an expert on that, but the feds don't seem all that interested in managing the problem because the problem seems to be worse than it ever was. So maybe we bring it back to the municipal level. I'll use my area, for example, Burlington, Ontario, right on the shores of Lake Ontario. There are dozens of fire departments or fire stations in Burlington. Every one of them employs a lot of different firefighters who have got state-of-the-art equipment to respond to just about anything. Maybe part of their job or a couple of people that are on staff, maybe we even have to hire some, but maybe part of their responsibility for Burlington Fire is managing Burlington wooded areas. Maybe they go in with a rake and a shovel and take out all that dry excess tinder that could cause a wildfire just to make sure it doesn't happen. I know that firefighters have got a lot on the go. I'm not downplaying what they do in any way. I'm just saying that it has to be somebody's responsibility, and the feds can't seem to manage this, so somebody has got to take it over. Could we do that with our fire department? Have them in their area manage their wooded areas to try and prevent fires? They don't just put fires out, they should help prevent fires. And maybe in exchange for that, we take away one of their other responsibilities. Maybe there's less fire departments sitting on the side of the highway blocking off lanes of traffic because of a fender bender. Maybe we could do less of that and get the MTO or the police more involved and have them do that sort of thing so that the firefighters can worry about actual fires. Hey, it's just a thought, everybody. I'm talking off the top of my head here, but I think a lot of people can get into this conversation now, and we can try and reimagine how Canada might look without completely over-the-top rules and just add a little bit of common sense into this. No, we don't want forest fires. If people are causing the fires, okay, let's deal with how they're causing the fires and not do a blanket ban for everybody who has never started a forest fire in their entire life, and there's no reason to think they ever will. And that's the story for the vast majority of Canadians. I'm going to move on here and talk about a few other things. Last week, Prime Minister Carney, following up on his failure to get a deal done with America, it was a brief media avail. He talks here for about 2 minutes or less. Let's hear a little bit of what the Prime Minister has to say.
Minister, how did the meeting go today?
It was very good. It was very constructive. Hi, everyone. It's a good place to go afterwards, actually. No, it was a great meeting, very constructive. Lots of good ideas, good energy in the room. There's lots to do, and actually, when we take, as the Government of Canada, when we take this meeting with Métis, the meeting in Inuvik 2 weeks ago, just about 2 weeks ago with Inuit rights holders, meeting with First Nations rights holders, there's a model that's starting to come together. There's no one-size-fits-all. Obviously, there'll be a variety of different projects, a variety of different approaches and participations. But there's a very strong momentum, and it's a momentum, I'll say, that's shared across the country. Canadians coming together, looking to build together and participate, take matters into our own hands. Alors, c'était une réunion très.
All right, he's going to go into French there and say basically the exact same thing. The Prime Minister is out on this Indigenous consultation tour. That's part of his job. Yes, before we do some of these nation-building projects, he has to consult with all the stakeholders, including Canada's First Nations. Absolutely, for sure. But doesn't it kind of seem like the prime minister isn't really all that concerned that we didn't get a deal done with America? He doesn't seem all that concerned that there's no way to deny anymore we are in a recession here in Canada. The prime minister hasn't actually said the words, and I assume as a former central banker for both Canada and the UK, the thought of saying out loud that we're in a recession is probably scary for Mark. But Mark is no longer the governor of the Bank of Canada or the Bank of England. He's the prime minister of Canada, and frankly, I can't understand why he won't say that we're in a recession. We lost over 40,000 jobs last month, and the economists are forecasting at least 110,000 more by the end of this year. It could even be more. Once they say we're in a recession, it's basically no rules. It's going to be anarchy. Companies are going to be falling all over themselves to get rid of staff because that's a good opportunity to do it. You can blame it on the economy. You can say we're in a recession. We got to downsize. And that gets them around various labor laws and things like that. Is that why the prime minister won't say it? Or does he not want to admit it? Or does he not acknowledge that we're in a recession? And what is going on with these nation building projects? I'm going to just read off a brief summary here of the prime minister's week. You know, we still don't have this list of nation building projects. We still don't have a deal with America. It seems like the prime minister is very disinterested in governing as a prime minister. It's a very, very weird thing that's going on. He's so nonchalant. Even with the brutal beating of that Jewish man in Montreal, it took him a full day to put out a statement denouncing it. What does he do all day? And despite what I just said, his poll numbers are still pretty good. I mean, I can't even argue with the fact that he's still got pretty good poll numbers. I'll tell you about that in a sec. Let me read you last week for Mark Carney. He announced $700 million in loan guarantees for the softwood lumber sector. I get that this is a sector that employs a lot of folks, particularly out west. Seems like every time we turn around, there's a problem with softwood lumber, and we're constantly subsidizing the industry. When are we just going to say, you know what, we're not a softwood lumber country anymore, and just move these people into other careers? Because it seems like softwood lumber is becoming more of a pain in the ass than it's worth. To be honest with you, $700 million in loans guaranteed just for that industry. There was a $500 million investment into supercharging product and market diversification. Where the hell's that $500 million going? Companies contracting with the federal government are now required to use Canadian lumber. I don't know why they weren't in the first place. If you're bidding on a contract with the Canadian government, I would think step one is to say we're going to use Canadian lumber to build the project. And if they don't, I don't understand why we would give them the contract. I don't understand that at all. We're spending $50 million to reskill and upskill and income support the softwood lumber workers. Meanwhile, the prime minister, after failing to get a deal done with America, dispatched a couple of ministers down to Mexico to feel them out to see if there was any interest there in doing a Canada-Mexico deal. Mexico shot that down. They said, no, we don't need a bilateral deal with Canada. We already have the USMCA. Our trade deficit, we just found out, widened. $5.9 billion in June. That's our trade deficit. Exports to the U.S. increased 3.1%. Exports to other countries down 4.1%. Total exports declined almost 13% in Q2. Student unemployment, highest level since 1993. Toronto real estate listings, record high in July. Canadian consumer insolvencies, the June numbers are out, largest volume since 2010. And we lost 41,000 jobs. I just said a couple of different things that happened in the last week that involved the prime minister and our federal government. And now I'll say it again. His poll numbers are up. A new poll from Abacus Data suggests Prime Minister Carney and his government are slipping in popularity, but overall opinions remain broadly positive. The Carney-led Liberal government's approval rating dipped to 50% in the latest polling. That's down 2 percentage points compared to just 2 weeks ago. The level is also the lowest since March, before the election. Roughly 48% of respondents view Carney favorably. 48%. 19% disapprove of the prime minister's performance so far. I feel like those polls aren't right, guys. I feel like there's some accuracy there for sure. For sure, the prime minister is still getting a lot of runway from the Canadian people. Absolutely. There's not a hatred for Mark Carney that we saw like we saw with Justin Trudeau, for sure. But I still have to think more than 1 in 5 Canadians are dissatisfied with how things are going. I don't understand how anybody could look around and say things are going great. I just don't understand it. Here's the reason that the prime minister's numbers are still as good as they are. Number one, because Canadians hate the thought of elections. We just had an election. We don't need to vote again. We just settled this. For whatever reason, Canadians are very hesitant or resistant to having elections. And I don't know why exactly, but they'll say it's political stuff. They don't want to get caught up in it, I guess. They don't want to have to pay attention to the news. And some people do, specifically just around elections. So maybe that's it. Maybe people just, he's not doing a great job, but I don't want to go vote anymore, so we're fine. Maybe that's it. There are those who actually think that the prime minister is on the right track. I personally don't understand what track he's on because it doesn't seem like much is getting done here. And it seems like just about everything he promised, the reverse is actually happening. But he's still popular. He's most popular with senior citizens. Senior citizens. That is something we knew before the election. It's something we realized the day after the election. And it's something that is still true today. Seniors like Mark Carney. Seniors are also the demographic that still watches mainstream media television news, though. And that's a big problem because the more I watch it, and you're welcome to do your own experiment, the more I watch the mainstream media news, the CBCs, the CTVs, etc., it just seems like propaganda. They're all running the exact same stories with the exact same clips. It seems like propaganda. It seems like it's being organized on a large scale, too. If you just watched the CBC, you might think that everything is going great. But then when I flip over to social media and I see regular folks that I know are just regular run of the mill, down the middle, sometimes left, sometimes right, moderate people, they're frustrated right now. So how are the older folks still keeping Carney at 50% popularity when by right he should probably be about 10 points lower than that? Still winnable in an election, but not as popular as the polls say he is. I think it's because old people aren't feeling it yet. Let's be honest here. There has been no effective leader of the opposition for months. Since the election, there has been no Pierre Poilievre standing up in the House of Commons, pointing out everything this government is doing wrong and giving you undisputable evidence that what we're doing is not working. That was what finally sunk Justin Trudeau. If Pierre Poilievre hadn't come along, we would still be paying the carbon tax and Justin Trudeau might still be prime minister. People didn't turn on Trudeau en masse to the point where 4 out of 5 people wanted the guy gone. That didn't happen until there was an effective leader of the opposition. And it took Pierre Poilievre a long time to find his stride. But once he did, he was very effective at getting the country to realize Trudeau was the biggest mistake this country ever made. Bar none. Justin Trudeau, well, and his dad too. There hasn't been an effective leader of the opposition for a while now. Pierre Poilievre lost his seat. So he's trying to run out in Alberta right now. That election is, I believe, Thursday, and there's no reason to think he isn't going to win, but wow, is the left ever trying. They are trying as hard as they can to try and sow doubt that Pierre is going to win his seat on Thursday. They don't want him. They're even trying to pretend they're conservatives, trying to convince other conservatives, we got to get rid of Pierre because he's not the right guy. The fact that there's that many liberals saying Pierre is not the guy leads me to believe that they know Pierre is the guy and they do not want him back in the House of Commons. They're undermining him at every turn. This longest ballot initiative with over 200 people running for that seat in a basically remote northern Alberta town, it doesn't make any sense to me other than it is a concerted, coordinated effort to try and get rid of Pierre Poilievre. Why do they want to do that? Because once Pierre's gone, then they can put in Doug Ford or Tim Houston or someone like that. The Liberals would like to be able to decide who the next leader of the Conservative Party is because that obviously improves their odds greatly, and they know that Pierre Poilievre is effective. He's proven he's effective. He's the reason we don't have Justin Trudeau anymore. I'm pretty confident Pierre is going to win this week, and then I think we're going to be looking at a different situation because next month, the government is going to have to table a budget. They're at least going to have to tell us how bad the debt is. And all indicators are the debt is now double what it was under Trudeau. The deficit, double what it was under Trudeau. Think about that for a second. We know things were bad under Trudeau. Apparently, they've gotten a hell of a lot worse. We also know that Carney is planning to lay off thousands of civil servants. They're not going to be let go by attrition. The Conservative plan was, we're not hiring any more federal bureaucrats. The ones who are there now can stay until they either move on or retire. And then some of those positions won't be replaced. That's what attrition means. The Liberals are going hardcore. I never expected this from Mark Carney, but he's going to take an axe to the federal civil service and he's going to cut thousands of jobs. That's not going to help these jobs numbers, which are already looking pretty bleak. In fact, the successes that we did have in the jobs numbers last week are mainly attributable to hiring in the federal sector. So we get Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons or anybody as the leader of the opposition. That's what's needed here. An opposition leader who gets just as much attention as the prime minister when it comes to media airtime. The Conservatives, I think, are very much looking forward to Thursday because once Pierre has got his seat, they can't take it away, and then he can be a little more Pierre, like he likely wants to be. Although I do think he's learned a few things. I think now, after all this time after the election, he's realized what I was saying during the campaign, that the Dr. Seuss thing wasn't working. The constant rhymes and slogans, it just wasn't cutting through anymore. The marketing went too far. I think we're going to see a slightly different Pierre Poilievre as of Thursday when he wins his seat in Alberta. But then we've got the budget coming down. We've got an opposition leader. We've got a whole bunch of bad housing news coming our way soon. Just got a little sniff of it today. Some new numbers on housing, and it is not good. Let me read you this story here. The final tally for 2024 housing starts in Ontario, far behind what's needed to get the province to its housing goals. The Ontario government recently updated its housing tracker for the first time in 8 months. It shows about 94,700 housing starts. That includes long-term care beds, post-secondary housing, and retirement home suites, in addition to 73,000 traditional home starts. But in order to meet the goal of 1.5 million new homes by 2031, Ontario needed to add 125,000 last year, and probably not factoring in the long-term care homes and the residences for students. We are way behind on housing, and for some reason, there's still people coming here en masse in huge numbers. The housing crisis is not going to get any better. We're going to have issues with $10 a day childcare. We're going to have issues with the school nutrition program. A lot of stuff is going to come to a head this fall, not the least of which we're going to have to acknowledge the fact that we're in a recession, and the prime minister is going to have to try and explain his way out of that. All of these things are happening on Prime Minister Mark Carney's watch. He's had more than 100 days now, and while nobody expected him to clean up Trudeau's mess in 100 days, there should certainly be more progress being made, particularly on the one thing that Mark swore he was going to do, protect us from Donald Trump. He was going to be the guy who was going to tame Trump and show him who the boss is. Can we at least all agree now that that was a lot of bravado, that was a lot of posturing, and that really didn't happen? I still think we're going to get a deal done. I do. I firmly believe something is going to get done. It has to. Because Canada can't keep going like this. We can't. We are broke. We're broke. Something is going to need to get done. And all of that is going to lead to a perfect storm. I still think we're going to be having an election before Christmas. It's highly likely. The Liberals have a minority government. If Pierre Poilievre gets elected on Thursday, and again, there's every reason to assume he will, and if the budget comes out in September and it's as bad as we're expecting it to be, and if some unpopular decisions need to get made about immigration, about housing, about job cuts, and so on and so forth, I think it's the perfect storm. I really feel like we're going to be having an election this fall. It could happen that quick. And of course, it'll also depend on what's in that deal with Donald Trump when it inevitably gets done. And I do believe it's going to get done. That's a little bit on the prime minister from last week. Now let's go to another person who's just getting way too much attention for all the wrong reasons. I want to play a little bit now of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Doug Ford, when we had Trudeau in power, he was the guy who kind of had to lead the charge. He was doing all the American media interviews. He was the guy who was sort of the face of the whole operation because he was the chair of the Council of the Federation. Premier number one. Premier. Then when Carney came along, Ford sort of fell into the shadows. Carney and his team were going to do it. They took Ford off the plan. Well, Doug is still talking, and he sounds really unhinged at times. Let me play just a little bit of Doug's greatest hits from last week.
And as everyone here knows, President Trump's tariffs are taking direct aim at Canada's economy and Canadian workers. His decision to increase tariffs on Canadian goods to 35% is only adding to the uncertainty for businesses and workers. And I want to be clear, in the face of the tariffs and economic uncertainty, our government will do whatever it takes to protect Ontario. And I know we have great partnerships, including by supporting the federal government in its efforts to reach a good deal for Canada. And I had an opportunity to speak to the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc, and had an opportunity to talk to Secretary Lutnick. And Canada has a good, solid plan to move forward. And in the meantime, we're continuing to deliver on our plan to protect Ontario by making our province more resilient, competitive, and self-reliant.
I mean, I just don't see any evidence of that. How? Things are worse than they ever were. We're paying 35% tariffs, although even that's a little misleading. The tariff is really only on anything that is non-CUSMA compliant. CUSMA covers like 90% of the trade back and forth. There's tariffs on a very small amount of things, and by and large, so far, most people are not really feeling the effects of the tariff increase yet. They might at some point, but so far, it hasn't been that bad. The premier going out with these drive-by shots at Donald Trump, I can't quite figure out why, other than it's a distraction to focus so that we don't focus on the domestic issues that are not getting handled. I don't know if Doug Ford out chirping Donald Trump is actually making an impact or if it's just an irritant. The Americans have said it's an irritant. What does Trump himself think? I don't know. But he can't possibly be happy with this sort of stuff. Here's Doug Ford last week on CNN.
What's the general impression of Trump in Canada?
He's probably the most disliked politician in the world in Canada because he's attacked his closest family member, and that's the way we look upon it. And when I talk to the governors and senators and Congress people, even Republicans totally disagree, but they're too scared to come out and say anything because the president will go after them. Outside of a few senators, and I want to thank them for coming out and standing with not just American people, but their closest friends and allies, which is Canada. And again, we love the Americans. It's unfortunate President Trump decided to go down this road.
I mean, he just sounds like he's trying to milk this crisis as much as possible. It sounds like he is trying as hard as he can to take the focus off of issues here in Canada and just make everything about Donald Trump. I think it's very disingenuous. Or maybe the premier is just completely off on this, but I don't think the average person, the average middle-class person, is all that upset right now. They're upset that we don't have a deal. They're upset with all the issues that are facing Canadians right now. Immigration, jobs, the economy, the housing crisis, you name it. They're upset with a lot of different things. Crime. Yeah, not the least of which is crime. But the Trump stuff, Doug sounds a little unhinged. There was a couple of media pundits that are friendly to Doug that tried to politely say, this isn't a good look. You look like a crazy man at times, ranting and raving about Donald Trump. Why don't we worry about domestic issues? One of the other things that came up with Doug Ford was the tunnel. He wants to build this tunnel under the 401, and now we know how it'll work. It'll be 3 levels underneath Canada's busiest highway. One level will go east, one level will go west. The third level will be for a train, a subway, transit. I don't hate that idea. I just don't understand why we would be prioritizing that and some of the other street projects that the premier is working on when there are other options available. The premier got asked a good question about the 407. That's the express toll route that goes across Ontario and completely gouges every single person who uses it, charging completely outrageous fees.
I've said this, the worst thing a government did was sell the 407 for $2.5 billion or thereabouts, and now it's worth $35 billion. And that's going to be at capacity at another 20 years, 25 years. 401's already at capacity. All 400 series highways will be at capacity. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's and. We got to look at the 407, but we also have to look at the tunnel because it wouldn't make sense just to do the 407 that's jammed in 20 years.
It does make sense. You don't make sense saying it doesn't make sense. Listen back to what you just said, Doug. The 401 is at capacity now. They estimate the 407 will be at capacity in 20 to 25 years. It makes perfect sense that you get cars and trucks off of the 401 and put them on the 407. And the only way it's going to happen is to take down the tolls. It's either got to be no toll or very low toll. Now, the cost here is the problem. Doug has got a few pet projects that he promised a few folks that he wanted to do. He wanted to build the 413. Well, the 413 basically runs parallel to where the 407 already is. And we don't even have to build anything. The 407 is already there. But no, Doug promised the 413, so he's going to build it. And we're going to spend billions on it. He is going to spend billions on the Bradford bypass. I think that that's long overdue. Good on him for doing that. There needed to be a better way to get across Newmarket to get over to the 400, which is the gateway into Northern Ontario. That one makes perfect sense. Putting in the tunnel makes no sense. Sure, we can study it. Sure, we can prepare to do it. But before we spend any money on tunnels or the 413, we got to buy back the 407. Actually, we don't even need to buy it back. This is a real easy thing. We just need to annex it and compensate the current owners appropriately. Give them a check for what it's worth and they can sue us for the rest. The accountants and the lawyers can figure it out. We could have the tolls gone on the 407 in a week, but there's no desire on the Premier's part, even though it's completely reasonable to consider that a solution. We have a right now problem that needs a right now solution, and buying back the 407 and taking off the tolls is the right solution for right now. But I get it. If we do that, we don't have money to build all these other pet projects that the Premier wanted to do. Okay, well, after we buy back the 407, it'll be 25 years before it's at capacity. It'll actually free up capacity on the 401. Then we can start saving our money for the next project, which might be the tunnel, might be the 413, might be a lot of different things. Stop screwing around with this and get something done. People are sitting in hours and hours and hours of gridlock every single day, and nobody seems to care. All they're focused on is dig, dig, dig. Expropriate farmland and pave it over. It's completely ridiculous. Just completely ridiculous. We need to focus on issues that are happening here at home. Forget Donald Trump. Forget him. A deal might get done. A deal might not get done. We'll probably be insolvent before anything happens anyway. If we're being honest here, Canada's in bad shape financially. We got premiers that are doubling down on spending money on dumb stuff that isn't actually going to solve the problems that regular folks are dealing with. Let's get to a little bit of Premier Ford's news conference last week at Queen's Park. Listen to some of this.
How was the meeting with the...
I thought it was positive. The good news to Ontarians and Canadians is we're all united from coast to coast to coast. And, you know, I just mentioned what I mentioned earlier in our early press conference, that we have to start creating the climate and the conditions for companies to come here. And let's put money back into people's pockets because the uncertainty is not good. We need certainty, and let's control what we can control. Not what Donald Trump dictates, but what we can control. What we can control is making sure we lower taxes. Not being one of the highest taxed jurisdictions anywhere, the highest rate of 54%. Let's lower corporate taxes until we can attract businesses and jobs and opportunities. Let's look at the steel market, for instance. We need to create these large infrastructure projects like the pipelines, like building ships right here in Ontario, but across the country as well. Let's look at the interest rates. The Bank of Canada, they need to lower those interest rates by whatever, half a point. Give some confidence to people. Let's look at the stress test. You know, I'm in favor of a stress test, but not adding 2% on top of it. Let's maybe lower it a little bit until families that are just going out to get their first mortgage have an opportunity to do that. But we need to move faster, quicker, immediate.
Doug Ford, you need to move faster, quicker, immediately on actual issues. I agree with the premier that interest rates need to come down. That's a big, big, big problem right now. These interest rates need to come down. They've needed to come down for a while. And to Doug Ford's credit, he's been the only premier that has been openly critical of the Bank of Canada, calling for those rates to come down. That's good news. Thank you, Doug Ford. But what about the other stuff? You said we need to move quickly. Are all of the interprovincial trade barriers down? Yes or no? Yes or no? We were told Canada Day. And that came and went, and all that happened was the federal trade barriers came down, but I still can't get a bottle of wine from Kelowna. I still can't. Why? Are all the interprovincial trade barriers down? The answer is no. Has the Prime Minister given us a list of nation-building projects that are going to get built? No. Have we approved pipelines? No. Have we done anything? Well, if they're doing something, they're certainly not telling the public about it, and I can't figure out why. We've got a hell of a lot of problems in this country, and it would be nice if premiers focused on those issues while the Prime Minister focuses on the federal issues. What are we doing about the traffic gridlock? What are we doing about the crime? Oh, the crime thing, we know. That can wait until September. The Prime Minister has assured us in the fall there's going to be bail reform. I don't believe it's going to be meaningful enough. I don't think it's going to change much, but we do need a change. That's a federal government thing that they decided could wait until after the summer. All right, well, that's a Carney problem. What about the problems here at home? Are they getting dealt with? Because it doesn't seem like they are. We got a healthcare system in complete crisis. We've got a school system that is just hanging on with toothpicks and Band-Aids. We got a real problem here, and nobody is talking about it because the premier keeps talking about Donald goddamn Trump. I'm sick and tired of it. I want leadership. When are these people going to step up and just tell us the way it is? And if they don't want to do something like buy back the 407, why? If they don't want to take out these automated speed enforcement cameras that everybody hates, but the municipalities love them because they raise your property taxes every year, but that's still not enough. They want the revenue from the speeding tickets as well. Doug Ford could get rid of those. He could say, no, we don't allow those in Ontario, and they'd be done. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we having a conversation about that? Or why don't you tell us why we need these? It's crazy. These politicians, they just talk about whatever they want to talk about, and we're the ones who get screwed because our issues aren't getting dealt with. Here's a little bit more of Premier Doug Ford.
The Prime Minister,
That was my message.
Did the Prime Minister say to you when he was going to be speaking with Mr. Trump, or is there any indication of next steps?
No, he didn't say that he was going to be speaking to President Trump, but I'm sure he will be over the next few days. We also mentioned no deal's better than a bad deal. We don't want to get sucked in.
Even that. Oh my God. I can't do it with this guy. I just can't. No deal is better than a bad deal. You don't know what a bad deal is yet. Maybe this is the best deal you're going to get. Maybe. Trump doesn't seem like he's in the mood to mess around here. He really doesn't. Maybe he doesn't like that we keep going on television and trashing him. That we banned U.S. alcohol from the LCBO and liquor stores across Canada. All of these things are problems, and we just keep pouring gas on the fire. Why do we do it? Because every time Tim Houston and Doug Ford and David Eby and Wab Kinew and all these premiers, every time they talk about Donald Trump, they're not talking about an issue that matters to you. They're not. Drives me batshit crazy. Just drives me absolutely crazy. I'm running out of time for this episode, but a couple other things that I want to weigh in on from last week. Number one, I said that I would talk a little bit about Donald Trump. Here's the story with Donald Trump. This Friday, face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin. They are going to talk, and Donald Trump is going to try and broker peace in Ukraine. I think we all agree we want peace in Ukraine, right? Can we at least all agree we want peace there because way too many people are dying? We want an end to the war. It is remarkable that just because it looks like there's a glimmer of hope here that we might actually get a resolution to this war, people are losing their minds that Donald Trump would dare meet face to face with Vladimir Putin. How else are we going to solve this? Somebody has to meet him. Somebody has to talk to him. There's others who will make a big deal of the fact that Ukraine is not invited to that meeting. Well, I mean, they're not invited yet because there's two sides to this, and we need to first find out from the Russians what it's going to take. Then Trump calls up Volodymyr Zelensky. He says, hey, listen, I met with Vlad. He says he wants this territory and he wants you guys to do this and he'll do that. And this is what it's going to take to end it. Does that work for you? Great. If it does, we got a deal. If it doesn't, tell me what it's going to take. That's how these negotiations work. Zelensky and Putin are not going to sit down face to face at this point. Not yet. Not until there's something concrete and a solid, irrevocable offer on either side. That's what it's going to take. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, talked a little bit about this.
To your point about weapons, what we said to the Europeans is simply, first of all, this is in your neck of the woods. This is in your back door. You guys have got to step up and take a bigger role in this thing. And if you care so much about this conflict, you should be willing to play a more direct and a more substantial way in funding this war yourself. I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
Okay, I think a lot of people would agree with that. To be perfectly honest with you, if I'm reading the room, I think the average middle-class Canadian is tired of hearing that their money is getting spent on this war in Ukraine. We want it to end. We want a just ending, but we want it to end. The fighting at least has to end, and even if we can just agree on a ceasefire and work out the details later, the fighting needs to end. That's what Donald Trump is working on, and I get that people don't like Donald Trump. I don't either. But if he can manage to be the one who, after 3 years of this war, at least creates a ceasefire, then I'm 100% in favor of him going to meet with Vladimir Putin. I am not going to criticize him for meeting face to face with the so-called enemy. I don't blame him for doing it, and I think it needs to be done because I want an end to this war and I don't want any more people to die. Here's a little bit more of Vice President J.D. Vance.
One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. Now, what do I think is ultimately going to come out of this? Look, it's actually very simple. If you take where the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine is, we're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians probably at the end of the day are going to be unhappy with it. But I don't think you can actually sit down and have this negotiation absent the leadership of Donald J. Trump.
He's probably right, because nobody else has been able to make this happen. Again, go ahead and hate Donald Trump all you want, but don't be cynical when he's trying to do something good. If he goes in and ends up giving away half of Ukraine to Russia and really bungles this thing, by all means, jump all over the guy. But when he says he's going in the name of peace, and he does have a pretty good track record thus far of resolving world conflicts, I gotta think that we should give him a little bit of leeway to do that and not criticize even the idea that he's willing to meet with them. Let's at least hear what they come up with. And if it's bad, be critical. If it's good, there should be praise. We should be happy. There should be some relief. We don't want war. We don't want more people to die. If Donald Trump happens to be the one who makes that end, I don't know why we wouldn't give him the leeway to do that. It just doesn't make sense to me to get down on it before it even happens. One more I want to play from the vice president. He talked a little bit about what I see as a lot of mounting and convincing evidence that there was collusion between Barack Obama, FBI Director James Comey, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and others to try and undermine and discredit Donald Trump, and possibly a mass manipulation of the public through the Russia hoax. Here is the vice president. This is about 1.5 minutes long, but I think this is important to listen to because this story is not done being written. There's going to be a lot more to it, and I want you to stay up to date on this.
I absolutely want to see indictments, Maria. Look, of course, you got to have the law follow the facts here. You don't just indict people to indict people. You indict people because they broke the law. But if you look at what Tulsi and Kash Patel have revealed in the last couple of weeks, I don't know how anybody can look at that and say that there wasn't aggressive violations of the law. What they basically did is they defrauded the American people in order to take Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points and turn them into intelligence by defrauding the American people, defrauding the intelligence agencies, lying about what the intel said. They would take something that supported a Hillary Clinton campaign talking point, and they would overemphasize it and exaggerate it. They took anything that actually contradicted that narrative and they buried it deep. And through that, they actually laundered Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign talking points through the American intelligence services. That's a violation of the people's trust. That's a violation of what our intelligence services should be doing. And I absolutely think they broke the law. And you're going to see a lot of people get indicted for that. Here's the thing that should really bother the American people. What do you want our intelligence community to be doing? I want them to be catching bad guys. I want them to be making sure that terrorists aren't going to kill innocent American civilians. I don't want them laundering Hillary Clinton's campaign talking points into the American media and giving them this air of legitimacy. It is sick and it's disgusting. It hurt the intelligence community, it hurt the American people, and it hurt the first Trump administration. We've got to have consequences for it, or we're just going to see the same play repeated again and after again.
Powerful words from the vice president. Again, I said this a couple of weeks ago. It's entirely possible that there is going to be indictments, that there could be arrests. And one of those arrests could be Barack Obama. One of those arrests could be Hillary Clinton. It could be James Comey. There's a lot of people who are calling for something like that to happen. And if the evidence that the intelligence agencies are now putting out suggests that that's what Obama and Clinton and Comey and all those people did, if that's true, then yeah, there probably should be indictments. I don't see it how you could see it any other way. I mean, it was a gross violation of the people's trust. It was a wild waste of resources. And frankly, we just can't allow that to stand. Last thing I want to fit into this episode, and I'm already way over, so I'll just do this one quick. There's rising evidence, anecdotal though, that there's not a lot of people going to Las Vegas right now. Apparently, Las Vegas is a ghost town. A lot of staff there are complaining that they're making hardly anything in tips, whether it be the table dealers or the servers or what have you. Tips way down. That makes sense because the amount of people coming in way down. If anybody in Las Vegas is listening, let me tell you what the biggest problem with Las Vegas is right now. Number one, you're not the only game in town. It used to be, if I wanted to bet on a boxing match, you'd probably have to go to Vegas and go to a sports book and place that bet. Now I can do that in my car on my phone. Gambling has become a lot easier thanks to the apps and the legalization. You don't have to go to Vegas to place that bet anymore. But it's not just the gambling. Vegas is a prime example of where greed goes too far. Go to Las Vegas. You want to go into a nightclub. $50 cover in some cases. $50. You want to have a drink? $20 for a vodka and soda. That's gouging at its worst. You know, Las Vegas used to be great because you could get an airfare and hotel deal for between $500 and $700. Go down there for 4 days, up to a week. It would cost you about $600, $700, $800 all in for your air and hotel. You could walk into just about any hotel and get a buffet, all you can eat, for $19.99. And those were the high-end ones. You could get them even cheaper. If you were gambling, you could drink for free. If you wanted to go to a nightclub, they would let you in, no problem. No crazy cover charges or anything like that. And drinks were reasonably priced. But Vegas just saw all this money rolling in and thought, keep raising the price, keep raising the price. Now people have had enough. They can gamble elsewhere, and they don't need to pay a $50 cover to get into a club at the Wynn just because, I don't know, Steve Aoki is the DJ that night. They don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to just walk into a regular run-of-the-mill bar, watch some bartender take 2 seconds to pour them a vodka soda out of a gun and charge them $20 for it. Are you kidding me? People have had enough. And there is a real-life lesson for this. I hope that the fast food industry in particular, but several others as well, is paying attention. Because what people are showing here by not going to Vegas is that there are other alternatives. People have a ceiling and they're not willing to pay an infinite amount of money. I'm pleasantly surprised to see all the fast food restaurants introducing value menus, introducing great combo deals. Like I said, I've used this example many times. It wasn't that long ago. A Big Mac combo was $5.99. It was a little further back that you could get it for $2.99, but $5.99 I think has been the average for most of our lives. Why is that costing $16 now? And what's really funny is I'm watching them all now realize that they pushed people way too far, and now they're trying to lower their prices. They're trying to offer all these specials and things like that. I'm done. They lost me. I do not order coffee out unless I absolutely have to. I do not eat fast food on the road. There was a time when I used to do it probably every day or every other day. I would stop and get a burger, fries, and a drink. I haven't done that in years, and I'm not returning. I'm not. They raised prices way too high, and it was obviously pure greed because that combo that they were selling for $16.99 at its high point has now found its way down to $12.99. Really? So were the extra $4 per combo just pure profit, pure gouging? Do we have to worry that McDonald's is going to go out of business if they sell a Big Mac combo for less than $12.99? What happened to the $5.99 combo? I understand inflation and supply chain issues and what have you, but that increase is just crazy. And that's just McDonald's. You've seen it at all of these fast food chains. And that's just fast food. There's so many different industries. Airfare. How long until people say, you know what? Forget it. I've had enough. I'm going to come up with another way. The cost of just about everything has gone up, and people are finally starting to reject it, whether it's intentional or unintentional because they can't afford it. I'm glad that at least somebody is getting the message that you can only squeeze people so much. And it seems like Vegas has done it. It seems like Vegas found people's tipping point. If less people are going to Vegas right now, maybe Vegas should take a look in the mirror and say, where did we go wrong? And I think you're going to find the answer is in you just became too expensive and there are other alternatives. In the same way that I don't need to go and get a Whopper combo at Burger King because I can make my own burger even better and fresher and healthier at home for a lot cheaper. People are realizing the same thing when it comes to some of these travel destinations, and I don't feel bad for Vegas at all. I feel bad for the employees that are losing a lot of money. Hopefully, we don't see casinos going out of business or something like that. But either way, something's got to give. The people have a limit to how much they're willing to spend, and you just found it, Vegas. FAFO. There you go. Friends, we're just getting started on a whole week of Scott Fox After 9. Listener DMs coming up on Friday, and I'm going to get to as many of those as I can because they did come in last week, even though I was off. We're going to have that. We're going to be covering extensively this Trump and Putin summit. If they can actually get peace in Ukraine, I'm happy. I'm happy. I'll congratulate Donald Trump, even though that's not something I had on my bingo card for myself right now, congratulating Donald Trump about something. But I want peace. There's a lot of things happening this week. I will have them all covered for you right here on After 9. Make sure you download. And if you could, tell a friend. Spread the word. This is a daily podcast that comes to you from a broadcaster who is slightly right of center, but first and foremost, a common sense, middle-class Canadian. Let's talk out the issues with like-minded people. All right, have yourselves a great day. I'll see you right back here in less than 24 hours.